everyone, Assalamu alaikum. This is FEMYSO at the European election night, and we are here today for a second podcast panel. We're here in the European Parliament in Brussels. I am your host, Hiba Latresh, and with me are our amazing guests, Munira Kari, data and political analyst from Ireland, and Salim Uchar, who is studying international business intercultural studies from Germany, Stuttgart. So we are joined by a live audience who's encouraged to contribute whenever. So let's get right into it. So what is Brexit, and what would be their consequences on the EU and the UK? So Munir, what would Brexit look like after leaving the EU? Sorry, so how would the EU look like after Brexit?
Great. In the 1950s, when the UK joined the European Union, they joined with a mandate to help build Europe after decades of war, and to bring it together for peace, security, political cooperation, and to have more economic collaboration across the continent. In 2016, a majority vote decided to remove the UK from the European Union, and since then we've had a process of untangling the laws, the regulations, the everything in terms of how the UK is present in all the organs of the European Union. My experience, whether in New York or Brussels or in Geneva, was that the UK has had a very significant leadership role within the European Union. A lot of the policies a lot of the programs, the projects across the European Union are spearheaded from the UK and from UK diplomats and UK ambassadors here in the European Union. Their presence is definitely going to leave behind a significant vacuum, but at the same time, we have 27 member states with enormous political and economic willpower and political capital to continue to carry the vision that our foremothers and forefathers of the EU drew together when they came after decades of war decades ago.
So, would you like to jump into it from the UK perspective?
On the Brexit? Yeah, so following the Brexit referendum, many companies, for example, shifted assets, offices, or business operations out of Britain into the continental Europe. By the beginning of April 2019, banks had transferred more than $1 trillion out of Britain, and asset management and insurance companies transferred $130 billion out of Britain. What does it mean? We can say that Britain gets really affected by the Brexit in terms of economics, because all the companies who are in Britain are trying to set their minds and set their markets freely. And if you are in Britain, and since now you have been in Europe, after Brexit you won't be in Europe anymore, which means that you have to access those European markets. And if you lose the access to the European markets, you're losing access not only to the European people as itself, you're losing the access to the European market as on fullest. Like all the people living in Europe, they can't buy your stuff that you have while you are in Britain. So every company is moving out of Britain, like most of them. Like we can see like that many companies, for example, there is a German company in Düsseldorf who like his whole stocks are completely transferred to Germany because Britain is not safe anymore, since we know that the Brexit will occur in the 23rd October 2019.
So speaking of of the impact the UK has. Ireland is very reliant on the UK. So what would Ireland look like after Brexit?
Ireland traditionally had very strong economic, job-related ties, trade ties, diplomatic ties to the UK. Of course, the European Union shapes the conditions, shapes the environment, shapes the treaties in which EU countries trade together. But because of this enormous, significant bond between the UK and Ireland, I don't see that taking a hit in any way. Particularly because Irish citizens in the UK have the right to vote in UK elections, have the right to even run for local national office in the UK, and that special relationship with Ireland is not going to hopefully take a hit. If anything, Ireland is in a very unique position within the European Union to continue to trade the way it did. The only possible issue that is high on debate at the moment is the nature of the border with Northern Ireland. We have three camps. The first camp is to bring Northern Ireland, even if it's under the governance of the UK government, to bring it into European borders. So that's the first option. The second option is to have a hard border. That means the borders that separate Ireland and the United Kingdom are basically monitored by customs, by a hard border that inspects the trade, the labour, the citizen movement between the two borders. And of course, we have the current option where there is, as it traditionally existed, there is a light form of surveillance across the border, where the soft kind of soft security is imposed on selective. It's more selective. It's more on concerns on large bulks of trade or large bulks of certain merchandise that's being transported between the two areas.
Do you think it would have an impact on the European... So we talked like people between the UK and Ireland, so maybe on that whole European feeling, not only for Irish people, but also Europeans, now that the UK would be leaving, how do you think that would impact it?
How will it impact the relationship between European citizens? Specifically with UK leaving the EU, or...
The whole UK leaving the EU has created maybe a new feeling, and the impact it would have, first of people not being able to move as free as they used to, and the impact it would have between people, but also how they would relate to the European identity.
Yeah, okay. Very briefly, and I'll pass it on. For many European citizens, including myself, it's very sad to see a major contributor to the European Union in terms of ideas, in terms of innovations, in terms of programs and projects across the continent to leave the European Union, naturally. And with that comes also the kind of the consequences, the physical consequences of a country leaving, increased taxation on goods and services, the restrictions on movement into and out of continental Europe countries, and on a continental level, also the idea that Europe can be one. The idea that we can not only identify as national citizens and be proud of our roots as Irish, as French, as European, as many of the European countries, but also as European citizens, to be able to identify as individuals who represent the ideals that our foremothers and forefathers brought when they created Europe after decades of war, and the values of inclusion, of security, of diversity, of the idea that different people across the continent can come and live together safely and in peace.
So he mentioned goods. We've heard a lot of theories and research made on the impact it would have on goods and businesses located in Britain. But do you think that not only how would the UK manage Brexit? How would the UK manage their business and their migration, not only with non-Europeans but also with Europeans after Brexit?
So we can say that Britain is like in a country, an island. So if you keep that in mind, migration wasn't always like that big of a problem, but it will be more and more. And we can also say that because of the Brexit, that Great Britain as itself, with the migration and so on, will have like a whole different level when it comes to the Brexit, because many people not only want to go to Brexit, they want to leave the Great Britain, because we can say that there is a European identity going on in whole Europe, and if the Brexit occurs, we could say that like the whole part of London, the whole part of Great Britain, they will have a lack of identity, because if you, we are living in Great Britain, and Great Britain is leaving a big, like Europe is a really big institution. If we are leaving this institution, we are not just losing the businesses and the locals and the economists, we're just losing all the people who are living in Europe, you know. And this is like one of the biggest effects on the persons who are living in Great Britain. And yeah, for example, the young persons are mostly affected by this Brexit, because they're the future of Great Britain. And if Great Britain is getting out of the European Union, those young persons who are right now in Great Britain have to manage those conflicts which are appearing in Great Britain because of the Brexit, because they are the future, and in the future time they will have the problem with the conflicts. Yeah.
So you mentioned how important the UK is to Europe, and you talked about the history of Europe and how it would bring some really important changes. Do you think? Question to both of you. Do you think it would be possible that the UK backs off and eventually doesn't do the Brexit and stays within the EU?
Yeah, I would say just go on. Okay, so to start with that, if the Brexit occurs, okay, we have two possibilities. We have like a hard Brexit and a light Brexit. If a Brexit occurs, we have those two possibilities. And the best outcome for Brexit, for the Great Britain, would be, as we just know, the light Brexit, because through that we would the Great Britain would have a position like Norway has, or like Switzerland has. And if it gets in a hard Brexit, it will really, really bad for Brexit, for Great Britain. But if the Brexit doesn't occur, it will be really good for the European market as well, but also for Great Britain's economy, because right now, as we can see, the pound is rising and falling. So to come to your question, if we can stop the Brexit, it would be possible, but for that there should be a big movement. And for that, especially, I think that the young person, the young generation, should try to encourage themselves and start a campaign, for example, to do something. Because, as I said before, Great Britain's future are the young persons. And we, during the Brexit, we should not only think about this situation right now, we should think about the future of Great Britain. Because if we don't think about the future of Great Britain, we don't know what will occur to Great Britain with the actions we take right now. Don't you think so too?
Yeah, we people, the markets, the economy, we're all we're all very sensitive to uncertainty, right? And with the UK leaving the EU over the last 3 years, we've seen a roller coaster of uncertainties. Will it be a hard Brexit? Will it be a soft Brexit? Will there be a Brexit at all? That thought has also been entertained multiple times. I think that in itself, the fragility of the negotiations, the uncertainty of the negotiations, has had a severe impact on the economy. Right? We've seen the pound with every significant debate take a shortfall. Moving forward, I think the possibilities are all there to certain degrees and to certain factors, reliant on certain factors. We can hope that a soft Brexit would be delivered for the sake of British citizens, for the sake of better trade deals, better migration and job flows and whatnot. A hard Brexit will have its effect on citizens on both sides of the coin, those who have interests and businesses and trade in the UK, and British citizens who, vice versa, have interests in trade and migration, travel to Europe. Whether there is a possibility for Brexit as a whole, for the idea of Brexit as a whole to come, to fall apart, is extremely contingent to so many points. And I think the best people to decide on that are the British people themselves, who posed the idea, who posed the question, and who voted in favour of leaving the EU. And it's their responsibility and their call to decide whether that idea should be annulled.
Yeah, and I would like to add up on those information you just gave us that if you look at the elections of the Brexit back then, we could see that most of the persons who just voted for the Brexit were elderly persons, older persons, and most of the persons who were voting against the Brexit are the young generations, are the younger persons who think about the future of Great Britain. And that's what I think is more important to right now, because if we want Brexit to not occur, we should try to think about ourselves. We should try to think about the persons who don't want the Brexit and what they can do.
I think we soon start wrapping up, but I had a last question. So we have Brexit, but we've heard of other kind of forms of other country mentioning exiting the European Union. We've had Frexit and different versions of that. Do you think we would be going towards more European countries leaving the EU, wanting to leave the EU, or are we more going towards a dynamic where the EU is expanding itself?
Okay, over the last 10, 15, 20 years, with the advancement of technology and the access to the internet and the world being connected, the world's becoming closer not only in terms of ideas and values, but also in terms of how we live, where we go, where we travel, who we communicate, the relationships that we build, where we work. That sense of globalization is bringing the world closer together, and naturally, whenever there's a shift, whenever there's a change in the dynamics of how the world operates, there's going to be resistance to that, and that forms of resistance manifests itself politically on a regional level. For example, in Europe, like Brexit, individuals who are perhaps left behind by globalization, by the economy of globalization, by the politics of globalization, and they feel that their roles in society are also being left behind. This is not exclusive, this is a generalist statement, but that sentiment across Europe does also ring with other people who are being left behind by the idea of globalization. And so when Europe comes closer together under the ideals and values of the European Union, of bringing people together under the same values, that for me personally, and for a lot of young people, is something to cherish. It's something to encourage, because we can encourage a society in that sense. We can encourage a society that is more inclusive, that is more diverse in terms of its ideas, in terms of how we contribute to the world and how we contribute to each other's lives. But individuals who call for division between or segregation also have their main points, and we have to respect. If a majority votes to leave the European Union, the tools of democracy, the ideals and values of democracy requires to respect the outcome of those results.
I would like to add up something on that. Like, to come up to your question if the European is going to expand and be diverse and dynamic after the Brexit, I would definitely say yes, because right now we can see that, for example, Albania, for example, is going to join the European Union, and they're having like discussion and talking about how to join the EU and what is important during the joining of the EU. But also, if you like look up for those different mindsets of the EU as a country, like we know like there are several politicians in the EU who are talking about a Europe in the future which won't be like in a union or institution, it will be a country. Like we have like together one military, we just like have no borders anymore, and all those economist things like I don't know, like tradings and so on will be like handled under one house, you know, like everything will be like at one place, and this could be something which could occur in the future, and this should be really interesting because by that Europe would have like so many more doors to get open and to have such more like things to do that they can't do right now. So yeah.
So moving towards more of a federation. Okay. Do any of you have any points to add on the importance of staying in the EU, Brexit, consequences both on the UK and the EU?
Yeah, I just wanted to always as well like add up that when the Brexit occurs and all the companies are leaving Britain, it will just not like have a big impact on the economy in terms of the pounds and so on, and in terms of stock market and so on. It will also have an impact when it comes to unemployment rate, because right now we have like the lowest rate of unemployment in Great Britain since 44 years. But if the Brexit occurs, this could be like a whole nother, like it could like go up and to a rate which wasn't like seen before. And yeah, so we should try to be really like try to look what we're doing, because everything what Great Britain and the European Union is right now doing will affect the future.
A final message I'd say is twofold. There's a responsibility on governments and public institutions to democratize information, to make information accessible to those who are least likely to receive it. We are facing major challenges in terms of the information that we absorb as citizens, young or old or professional or across the educated or illiterate. We are facing a major challenge in terms of the information we're exposed to and how we formulate conclusions that bring us to the ballot box based on that information. And there's a responsibility. The responsibility is twofold. There's responsibility on the institutions to help democratize that knowledge and that information to everyone, and there's also a responsibility on the citizen to ensure that the information that they receive comes from credible and strong sources, and that if an information that is received or comes by them doesn't come from a strong or credible source, that they go and verify the information before that information is shared with others. And that way we can ensure that our participation in democracy, in the democratic machine, is a healthy participation that is based on informed opinion and facts. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Salim Wuchar and Munira Kari. Thank you for joining us. Please follow us, FEMYSO, on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also find us on our website, FEMYSO.org. And you can come back and check out our final podcast of the day after the European election results. Thank you very much.